Dear learners, welcome you all to e-learning platform. In the previous week, week 5, we learned part 2 Mosque of a Passage to India. In this week, week 6, you will learn the analysis, major themes and symbols of part 2 Caves of a Passage to India. Me, Faisal Ahmed, as usual with you throughout this lesson. Let's begin. So we are going to analysis, paraphrase, plot analysis, major themes and symbols of a passage to India, especially part 2, Caves. Part 2, Caves, summary. The day of the visit to the Marabar Caves arrives, and except for the absence of Fielding and his assistant, Professor Gadboul, who missed the early morning train, the expedition begins successfully. An elephant transports the party into the hills, and a picnic breakfast awaits Aziz's guests when they reach their goal near the caves. However, things begin to change when they visit the first cave. Mrs. Moore really faints when she feels herself crammed in the dark and loses sight of Adela and Dr. Aziz. She feels something strike her face and hears a terrifying echo. The echo sounds like boom or oh boom, utterly dull hope, politeness, the blowing of a nose, the squeak of a boot, all kinds of sounds, all kinds of speaking, all thing sounds a boring one, that is bowworm or boom. Coming at a moment when Mrs. Moore chanced to be fatigued, it had manners to murmur. The echo lingers in Mrs. Moore's mind and begins in some indescribable way to undermine her hold on life. She suddenly realizes that she no longer wants to communicate with her children, Aziz, God, or anyone else, and sinks into a state of apathy and cynicism. Meanwhile, Aziz and Adela are en route to visit more of the caves. Preoccupied by thoughts of her marriage and by the disturbing realization that she and Ronnie do not love each other, Adela inadvertently offends her host by asking an ill-thought question. Aziz is momentarily annoyed and slips into one of the caves to recover his balance. As he is a Muslim, he avoids illicit relationship with any women, sexual illicit relationship. Adela loses sight of him and also enters one of the caves. She was alone in the darkness of the caves. When Aziz reappears, he catches a glimpse of Adela running down the hill towards an approaching car after leaving the caves. Thinking that she has merely gone off to meet Ronnie, Aziz returns to the camp and learns that Adela has unexpectedly driven away. The remaining members of the expedition take the train back to Chandrapur. Upon their return, Dr. Aziz is arrested and charged with making insulting advances to Miss Quested in the Marabar Caves. Miss Adela Quested charged a rape case against Dr. Aziz after returning from the caves. That evening there is a meeting at the club, and Fielding stands alone against his countrymen by stating his belief that Aziz is innocent. As Fielding is a good friend of Dr. Aziz, that's why he took the stand for Dr. Aziz. Adela remains ill for several days, hovering between common sense and hysteria, and like Mrs. Moore, is plagued by the sound of the echo. When she was unsure what to decide, and she was not confirmed whether Aziz assaulted her or not in the caves, in the darkness of the caves. She begins to have doubts about what happened in the cave and eventually tells Ronnie that she may have made a mistake. Let's see what her mistake was. Mrs. Moore supports Adela's belief that Aziz is innocent, but Ronnie insists that the trial must proceed and sends his mother back to England. And Adela takes the stand. She feels herself return to the Marabar Hills and finds the exact reply to all the questions put to her. However, she is unable to say for sure whether Aziz followed her into the cave or not. She could see herself in one of the caves, but could not locate Aziz. Finally, she tells the court that she has made a mistake and that Dr. Aziz never followed her into the cave. The superintendent withdraws the charges and Aziz is released without one stain on his character. After the trial, Adela receives the news of Mrs. Moore's death at sea on the way to England and can no longer bear Ronnie's company. He eventually breaks off their engagement because marrying her would now ruin his career. As Miss Adela Quested is apathetic and supports Indian, then morally she is good. But on the other hand, Mr. Ronnie Hislop, the magistrate of the British India, is very strict and biased and always hostile towards Indians. Before her boys back to England, Adela is subjected to one final adventure when her servant Anthony attempts to blackmail her by claiming she was Fielding's mistress. By this time, Fielding, who believes that Adela should not suffer for her mistake, has managed to convince Aziz to renounce his right to monetary compensation. Analysis of Part 2, Caves. The Marabar Caves he describes are nothing more than a pattern of dull hollows, a tunnel 8 feet in length, 5 feet in height, and 3 feet in width, leads to a circular chamber, and the pattern repeats. The visitor may see as many as he likes, but at last he remains confused about the experience. The experience visiting the darkness inside the Marabar Caves. There is nothing notable about these caves. No pattern to differentiate one from the other, and nothing to call extraordinary. The author very beautifully captures the darkness of the caves and how the light dances on their surface when a visitor lights a match. Chambers within chambers, and then there can be chambers still unexplored with no entrances. Lesson 2. Major themes: cultural clash, friendship, public versus private life. Culture clash. British culture and Indian cultural clash that happened in this novel, A Passage to India. Let's discuss in detail. What is cultural clash? At the heart of A Passage to India and in the background is a clash between two fundamentally different cultures, those of East and West, India and Britain. The British poet Rudyard Kipling was born in India and lived there for several years as an adult, wrote East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. Without quoting or acknowledging Kipling, Forster adopts this premise as a central theme of A Passage to India. Second theme, friendship in the novel. E.M. Forster considered friendship to be one of the most important things in life. He once remarked controversially that if he were faced with the choice of betraying his country or betraying his friends, he would betray his country. A passage to India explores the nature of friendship in its various forms, and the word friend occurs frequently throughout the book. When we first meet Dr. Aziz and his friends Hamidullah and Mahmud Ali, they are discussing whether it is possible for Indians to be friends with the British. And the consequence was disastrous. So cross-cultural friendship never happens. That's we can find from this novel's message by Forster. Another major theme, friendship. Aziz has a curious friendship with Professor Gadbol. He likes Gadbol but is unable to understand him because Dr. Aziz is a Muslim and Professor Gadbol is a religious pious Hindu. So Gadbol himself has a friendly attitude, but he is vague and distracted. When Fielding tells him that Aziz has been arrested, Gadbol seems unconcerned. Public versus private life, another theme in the Passage to India that we found in the life of Magistrate Ronnie Hislop. Due to his public image, he just broke the engagement with Miss Adela Quested. Discarded his private life due to public image. The various attempts at friendship throughout A Passage to India are frustrated not only by cultural differences but also by the demands of public life or duty. These demands are strongest among the Anglo-Indian officials of Chandrapur. In general, characters such as Tartan, Calendar, McBride and Ronnie put their jobs above whatever personal desires they may have. The Tartan's bridge party is more a diplomatic exercise than a truly personal gesture. McBride, the superintendent of police, prosecutes Aziz because it is his duty to do so. Personal feelings do not enter into his decision. Ronnie breaks off his engagement with Adela partly because her actions in the court are seen by the Anglo-Indians as a public disgrace. Cyril Fielding, the principal of the government college, seems to be the only British character willing to act out a personal conviction rather than public duty. He prioritized friendship first, then his countrymen. And his friend is Dr. Aziz. The Anglo-Indian authorities believe it is important to keep up a public image of unity on the question of Aziz's guilt. So in this novel, through the character Cyril Fielding and Dr. Aziz represents the Indian culture and Cyril Fielding represents the British community, and these two characters tried to make a friendship between different cultures, British and Indian. And this thing E.M. Forster tried to show, and that resulted in a disastrous situation. Though it ended in a reconciliation, but it tells that cross-cultural friendship will never be successful. That's the end of the lesson of week 6. Thank you for being with me.